Well, hello, everybody. Excuse me. Jesus, I didn't realize that I cannot speak to save my life. Hi. Hey, Lizzie. The kittens say hello. You adopted two cute kitties, so I hope Luna's doing okay. For those who don't know, Lizzie and I have a cat with the same name, except now Lizzie has more than one cat. Um, Let me adjust the volume to this music a little bit here. That's better. I feel like I'm getting my ears, like my eardrums just blown out or whatever. Um, so hi. I don't know if how many of you have followed my co-host, the new hot thing that, you should have been on months ago. Um, but I have expressed an interest in writing my own visual novel, and weirdly enough, the music is kind of on theme. Um, so back around the summertime, I started exploring the idea of writing my own stories. I've had some experience of creative writing in my past, and me working on a short story is not alien to me. I have written many short stories in my past. Um, the way one of my creative writing instructors described me was, I have a very dark mind. I don't know if that was a compliment or not, but I did write some rather horrific stories. And I think that's kind of the reason why mysteries tend to get my attention. Hey, look at that. There's actually a typo over here. Um, so, for me, naturally, the idea of writing a novel is a little bit daunting. And a visual novel at that is very daunting. Now, I'm going to write the story. I don't know how the hell I'm going to put together a visual novel, but I feel like I'm capable of doing it. So, I feel like one of the things I'm going to do, just to at least kind of break the ice, is I'm going to read what I've written so far. I'm not happy with what is in these, 4 pages, but what I am happy with is the fact that I've attempted to write 4 pages worth of story. I have shared this with a couple of folks. When I did originally write this, I wrote this, believe it or not, on a train. Um, like I spent 7 hours, 8 hours on a train, and I just kept writing this and then going back and forth. Um, and I've done a lot of thinking about what I want to do long term with this story as well. But this is how it stands today, and I'll read this out loud. And I'm going to do my best not to critique what I've written, and I'm going to point out that a lot of this is going to change. One ask I have, and I'm going to bring this up repeatedly as I do these Mondays, is I don't want input unless I ask for it. And the main reason for that is this is my own creativity, and this is for me to write and for me to fuck up on. Like, I'm going to fuck up on this, and I don't expect this to be a great story, but I expect this to be my story, and that's what ultimately matters. So I paused the music. I'm going to read the pages off myself, and then I'm going to talk about why I want what I want to change and what input I did get. So, without further ado, I'll read this off. She has to be over there. There is nowhere else for her to run. A young woman hears off in the distance as she runs through the forest. Behind there are men with torches, with dogs barking, who are frantically looking around. Fortunately, she is not visible to them, but the dogs are able to smell her and are barking in her direction. As she runs, a river lies before her. Desperate, she runs across the shallow yet warm water, making sure to keep the locked wooden box from making contact with it. She makes it across the river and hurries up a small embankment. As soon as she's across, she turns around, and fortunately, it appears that the torches have made way for a bridge off in the distance. Panting and anxious, she continues to run but slows her pace. Nobody goes into these woods at night, and if they do, they are often never seen again, she thinks to herself. After an hour of running towards the now risen moon, she finds herself at a path. It is familiar in how it was described to her, but she had never seen it before. It was littered with stones, which appeared to be freshly grounded. She pulls out a note out of her satchel, and on it reads, "Turn right at the path after following the moon." Complying, she goes down the path and continues. It's warm and humid, but otherwise a fair evening. It never gets cold at night, and the worst the weather ever gets is a bit of rain. Daylight and moonlight are almost even most days, and she believes that at least half of the night has passed by now. The instructions given to her once she followed the path was to continue down this path defined as littered in stones, and to do so for what was likely to be another hour. She should then encounter two obvious trees, and it is there she will rendezvous with somebody obviously important. These vague instructions are going to be the death of me, she mutters. But as it were, the vagueness is on purpose. She was given them prior to her escape from her trial. She was found guilty of being a witch and was the first person not only to escape, but the first in the third era to have been accused and then convicted. In the first and second era, witches were found to be everywhere. People referred to the first as the wrath of witches, and the second as age of retribution. With the witches supposedly gone, it was declared that we are in the era of peace, and that many decades had passed since the era began. But it is to be assumed that we're entering into a new era. Her father outed her as a witch and immediately handed her off to the Grand Indicator, anyway, who then charged her with being one. He ordered an immediate trial, which started late into the afternoon on the same day she was handed over to him. Conviction means death. Death is by fire. Fire is in the town square for all to see. You're dropped into the pit of fire for everybody to witness. Your body is never recovered as you're turned into ash. Nobody comes back. She survived the first day of trial only because someone set fire to the grand courthouse just as the trial were to start. See, there's an inconsistency, and you may notice it. In the midst of the mayhem in the building, someone grabbed her and ushered her into a secret corridor, handing her the box and letter she has now. "Run and follow these instructions," he said, and he immediately disappeared behind a door that immediately turned into a brick wall as soon as he entered through it. Hey, Ikkyo. After an hour, she immediately runs across two towering trees. Hold on a sec here. Yeah. After an hour, she immediately comes across two towering trees which perfectly form an arch with their branches over the path. There's a symbol of a circle and a star in each of them. It has to be these trees, right? They have to be the obvious ones. The note said to simply wait. Vagueness once again in the note, but hopefully not too vague for her to be led astray. She sat down on a nearby rock. It had been hours since she was able to do anything but be on her feet. They felt raw, but not as raw as her wrists were. Not as raw as her wrists, which were for several hours clamped with metal bars. The bars were so tight that they dug right into her skin. The man who rescued her removed them during the escape, but they left large marks on her. The wind is blowing, and aside from insects making noises or whatever they do here, it is simply quiet. She has not heard dogs or men since she made it across the river, and the only light she can make out are the stars and the moon which hang over her. She must be alone now. She suddenly wakes up to daylight, and she is still alone. The sun was fully above the horizon, but just so that it has to be early morning. The note never made mention of what would happen at these obvious trees, and to be fair, the note doesn't even mention why the trees would be so obvious. With curiosity, she decided to look at the trees and notice the symbols once more. They're circles with a 5-point star in the middle. They have to be fresh carvings, no more than maybe a day or two old. These symbols were not new to her, as they were the same on the box that she was carrying, albeit it had a much more ornate engraving. With her finger, she circled the carving on one of the trees. Tracing her index finger from the top of the circle, she followed it, and upon reaching quarter way, she heard a click behind her. The rock she fell asleep on opened up and revealed itself to be a chest. What the hell is this? She screamed out loud as she pulled her finger away from the tree. This is not something she had ever seen before. A rock that opens up and is hollow inside? It was solid like any other rock. How could it be that it opened up? She turned to look at the circle she followed with her finger. It was glowing blue. Why did she decide to trace her finger on that circle? What compelled her? This has to be magic. I thought magic was gone. I thought it went with the witches. Am I really a witch? She thought to herself. Nervously, she approached the now hollow rock and peered inside. There was a key, a flask, and another note. This had to be the obvious place. There was nothing else that could be more obvious. Two trees carved with the symbol on the box she was handed, a rock that is somehow able to open through tracing one's finger on a carving. Nervously, she grabbed the handwritten note and it read, "Hello, Annabelle. It should be daylight as you're reading this. I am sorry for all the confusion, and I hope that you made it safely with the box. The key inside of this chest will allow you entry into my home, which is a short walk past these trees. Let yourself in, and I will join you by nightfall. I have left you something to drink, which should make you feel much better. Should make you feel better quickly. Only consume it when you have made it to my home, as it is the safest place to do so. I will reveal myself upon my return." The note's writing resembled the note she received earlier. At least now it was less vague, even though she had no clue to who the person was. She looked at the key and the flask and proceeded to walk down the path. As she passed under the trees, she heard a thud again, and the rock was closed. She hurried back and could not see a single gap anywhere. She knocked on it, and it didn't sound hollow at all. A few minutes later, she found. Oh, sorry. Going back to the trees, she noticed the symbols were gone. Everything was confusing, but she decided to go down the path as instructed. A few minutes later, she found a wooden home. It looked very meager but well kept. It had to have been expensive build as it had glass windows. Her father's home had glass windows, but most of the townsfolk did not. Whoever was involved in her rescue was well to do. She inserted the key, entered the home, and placed her belongings on the table in the entryway, and immediately on a chair that was far more comfortable than that rock. Everything was sore, so she opened up the flask and began to drink the liquid. She felt this warmth take over her body and then felt drowsy. "I guess I'll take a nap," she said, and immediately fell asleep for the second time since leaving home. And this is kind of where the initial setting kind of left off. The part here it says it was nightfall and Annabelle. Um, I don't like this section, and that is largely because I feel like it's a bit rushed. A couple of inconsistencies here about what I've written so far. You may have caught it. I did. Um, one of the things here it says. Let's see here. Let's see, where did it say? What did I said something here and I contradicted myself here. Let's see. Yeah, sorry. It says she was found guilty of being a witch, right? And that's fine, but the problem is that we never finished trial. Now, in theory, in a witch trial, historically speaking, I don't think it would have fucking mattered. If you look at the Salem witch trials, a lot of the things that I'm going to be basing on, are going to be based on some of the stuff from actual Salem. Um, the survival rate of those who ended up going to prison as a result of the witch trials was something like 20%. Like, and like 95% of all those who were actually charged and I believe convicted were women. Like the other 5% were men. So like I really want to make the stakes really clear here that going to these trials does have a significant likelihood of you being found guilty. Some obvious things that I could discuss here include the fact that you may have noticed a little bit of some theming based on a very similar game that I played. Yes, it's intentional, and yes, I'm doing this because I'm angry at that game. Um, but one of the things that some friends pointed out is to write what I feel like writing and correct things as I see fit. And I kind of feel like that's the best approach. I know there's going to be mistakes in this. Um, you can't write how many letters is it? How many words in here? 1,584 words on a train um, while you're staring out the window, looking at the nice scenery, and not make mistakes. It's impossible. I don't see how you can pull it off. So, I see two mistakes. I've already seen some grammatical errors. The way some of the wording in here is awkward. And truthfully, I haven't written anything like this. Like, I haven't written a short story in 15, 20 years, and I haven't written a novel ever. So for me, this is very much green territory, and I'm going to enjoy this, and y'all are going to have to put up with my attempts to figure out what works here. Um, this is the second or third attempt that I've made at writing a story like this. But it's the second time this year, and and both of those two attempts, both the ideas are all centered around the same core story that I'm using as inspiration. Now, one of the things that I'm uncertain about is like, am I writing this in the way that I should? Should I write this as a proper story and then chop it up and put it into a visual novel? And I probably could spend some time reading on what's a good way to do development of a visual novel. But then a lot of the things that I don't want to focus on, or one of the things I don't want to focus on is like, what's it going to look like? What is the music going to be? Because I don't have any experience in that area. I don't really have a very good artistic sense. Um, I have, um, I feel like I have a good imagination to write a story and do world building, but I don't have the skills to give you good scenery, or rather to flesh out a good visual novel story. So, how I'm going to approach this is I'm going to talk about everything I don't like in my first chapter, and then I'm going to talk about what people had given me for input. So, a couple of things to start off on here is, aside from the mistakes, I want to expand upon her escape. So, one of the things here I talk about is she's running away from what we can only assume at this point in time to be like guards. They are there to, go after the person who has escaped custody, and they have dogs. And these dogs cannot see her, but they can smell her. So, should we immediately go to a river? Is that too rushed? Or should I make it so she's seen and then she isn't seen? Should I add that suspense? So that's one of the things I kind of want to expand upon. I think the immediate rush to safety is a mistake here. So how I'm gonna do this is I'm gonna like break these apart here. And I'll put some music back on here because like I had Professor Layton's music playing a bit earlier. I don't want it super loud because it's just going to blast into my ears here. Okay. So, at this point here, she's going up the river and she makes it across makes it across the river successfully, right? How should I approach this, right? Like, one of the things that I need to make a little bit clear here, and I might just suspend this, is that if you run across a river, it doesn't mean that your scent is gone. Hey, Pale Bunny. That does not mean that your scent is gone. What it does mean, though, is um, it does throw your scent off. It doesn't mean like the scent is not going to be detected, but like as soon as you get to the other side of the river, you run across two other problems. It's just realistically, I don't think it's really that's the way I would put it. Like, how deep is this river? And like, what sort of footwear is she wearing? Like, I expand upon this a little bit later. She's been on her feet, but we don't make mention of what's on her feet. She could be wearing boots. But when you get to the other side of the river, you know, you could leave footprints, right? If it's rocky on the other side, maybe not, you know, it's tough to say. But she's not supposed to get the wooden box wet. So we need to have a river that is maybe not much deeper than, you know, up to her knees or something like that. So things like that. So let's put this here. We'll just maybe like say here, like talk about how deep the river is. Maybe add a little bit of suspense and all that sort of thing. So I'm putting these as my corrections in my own story. So like we can, when I come back to this, I can go and write this and be like, no, this sucks. I hate this, right? So we get to this paragraph here and we're talking about how she's continuing to run, but she's slowing her pace. But why is she slowing her pace? So okay, I'm not used to using Windows for writing this stuff here, so you put that there, right? And then one of the ideas here is like nobody goes in the woods and is never seen again. She thinks to herself. There's a little bit. I have a little bit of a conflict over this. Should she be the one that says this? Should I have one of the guards say this? So I'm gonna like highlight this as like, is this in the right spot? Because maybe I want the guards here to say it. There we go. And I'm just gonna make one slight here, just so I'm not frustrating myself with keyboard stuff here. Okay. So, after an hour of running, like, does she actually have a good concept of time? You know, I don't think I could easily discern between 45 minutes and an hour if I have nothing to tell time with. So, that's another thing that kind of annoys me about this. And by the way, I'm writing these as individual, like, portions. And I feel like I should get a chapter down and get it sort of, maybe it doesn't have to be perfect, but like get rid of all these annoying things that are really apparent and then just move on to the next chapter. And I feel like her escape should be a much longer chapter than, say, jumping into immediately meeting whoever this person is. And I feel like this isn't the time to introduce this person. But anyway, aside from that, I should continue on here. What it says here is, after an hour of running towards the now risen moon, she finds herself at a path. Well, what was she on prior to? So that's another thing here. Like, what am I on about? So there's that problem. It is familiar in how it was described to her, but she had never seen it before. It was littered with stones which appeared to be freshly grounded. How does she know what freshly grounded stones look like? So again, another problem here. So, so we got that part there, and then she pulls a note out of her satchel. And I'm going to complain about this here. Because she has a satchel, but she managed to escape her courtroom trial. Why would she have a satchel? Would it not be stolen from her? Would it not be taken away from her? So I feel like that's another thing here. And I don't know how to reconcile with this just yet, but I don't think the satchel is super important just yet. It is possible though, like, I don't know, like, let me pull up a character here. Cool. So I'll use, oh my god, I do not, wow, this is an actual, that's gross. This is why I'm doing this on here. So let's go to Professor Layton versus Wright, because that's where a lot of this comes from here. So this is Espella Cantabella. I think she's a well-designed character. I actually think that she's one of the most well-designed characters in the Ace Attorney games, and I guess elsewhere. And she does have a satchel on her left. Overall, her outfit is quite pretty. Is this the realistically speaking, if you were arrested, would you have this satchel still attached to you? Would you be permitted to keep that with you? Perhaps maybe they just don't give a shit and they just go like, yeah, you can hold on to it. You're gonna get burned to the burned at the stake anyway. So this is a conflict I have with myself over this. It's just, do I let Annabelle have a satchel? So again, something for me to consider. And the other thing is, we'd say turn right at the path, but she finds herself at a path. I should really describe this path. So like, maybe that's what I should change it here. It's like, describe the path, Carrie. Again, this is all world building. Like, I may not even get like actual more expanded words here. A couple things I don't mind. Complying, she goes down the path and continue and keeps like continues. Like, I think I'm gonna change this. Keeps a hurried pace. Why is this giving? Okay, it's fine. So it's warm and humid, and but otherwise, it's warm and humid. It's warm and humid, but otherwise would be considered. Here we go. It's warm and humid, but otherwise would be considered a fair evening. So when you say the weather is fair, you're usually implying that it's clear. And that, you know, like you can see the sun or the moon and the stars and that sort of thing. Fair can also imply that there might be a couple of hanging clouds around here. Like partly cloudy really is, you got big clouds coming in and, you know, you would occasionally have the sun blocked out or the moon blocked out. Fair would be like, maybe you might have like high altitude clouds at most, but realistically you would say that it's clear. And then I go on to say it never gets cold at night, and the worst the weather ever gets is a bit of rain. And I kind of want to expand on this because I don't want to say much right now, but this is going to become important as the story goes on. Like, a lot of the stuff I've done in world building has there's a couple little tiny things, and the weather is going to play some level of importance because it's going to become apparent in the story as we go along. I'm trying to like, and it sounds funny because you all are watching me write a story and build a world, but at the same time, I'm like trying not to spoil what the hell I have in mind for this. But this part's going to be fun, I feel, and I feel like it's going to be interesting. Daylight and moonlight are almost even most days, and she believes that at least half of the night has passed by now. I feel like this is a little awkward. So I feel like I want to cross that out. And then just say, let's revisit this. Oops. What's the key command for strike through on this? Okay. Then we get to here. The instructions given to her. Give me a sec here. I want to make a quick save, but I don't want you to see where I'm saving this to. There we go. I just didn't want to have you like see an entire UNC path or whatever. Okay. The instructions given to her once she followed the path was to continue down this path. God, I'm saying path how many times in this? Defined as littered in stones, and to do so for what be another hour. I'm going to strike this out. I'm going to strike this part out and be like, this sentence sucks. By the way, if I'm saying things like sucks, I wrote it, so I'm taking criticisms at my own project here. She would then encounter 2 obvious trees, and it is there she will rendezvous with somebody obviously important. We don't do that. We end up coming across a stone. So it really should become... Okay, so we got that. So, like I said, like this is gonna be interesting to rework here. These vague instructions are gonna be the death of me, she mutters. She's been thinking a lot of words up until this point. Does she just say this out loud? Should she say this out loud? Would that not reveal her position or whatever? Probably not, but this part here, maybe. But be it as it were, the vagueness is on purpose. But we like... I don't know about this. This is bugging me. I feel like... I feel like this is kind of the part that I'm kind of like wondering how I should talk about this. I feel like this should become... She was accused of being a witch. I feel like this might be a better way to talk about this. So, like, she was accused of being a witch and was the first person not only to escape before any arguments were made, but the first in the Third Era to have been accused and then convicted. Now I know that I'm going to talk about the what I talk about eras. I want to have a different concept of the time that has passed in this world that exists. And you may have noticed, like we're saying, third era. We have first and second era. I need to be very careful with how I talk about this because eras don't really have any sort of defined boundaries. Like the actual definition of a yeah, here we go. So like the actual definition of an era is just a point between A and B. So like Obama being president would be an era. You know, like it doesn't really have any sort of measurements. Like somebody being in charge of the government or in charge of the state would be the time they serve could be counted as an era. So that's how this could work. So like when we talk about the wrath of witches and the age of retribution, there's kind of a problem I have with this in that who define the wrath of witches? We say the people do, but like, do we talk about the common folk and all that sort of thing? And the second is the age of retribution. We're going to have to expand upon this, but when? Do we expand upon it early? Do I expand upon it in the middle of the story? I don't feel like you want to talk about it at the end. Perhaps maybe. Perhaps maybe you want to revisit the concept, right? The vagueness, and the other thing is we talk about the vagueness of the instructions, and then we immediately jump into, like, her being accused of being a witch, which is better than saying found guilty. So, like, we should kind of have that suspense. We don't want to say that she's been found guilty and that she's on the lam and she hasn't faced her consequences for being, convicted. However it be fair for her to be accused and all that sort of thing. And then, yeah. Anyway, so this is bugging me. Brett trial, Carrie. God, there's a big difference between trail and trial. Okay. I keep forgetting I'm not on my Mac. By the way, if you use a Mac and you use and then you use a PC to do things and you start using your scroll wheel, it's irritating, and I imagine it's both ways. It's irritating. The other thing about this is like we go with the witch is supposedly gone. It was declared that we were in the era of peace, and many decades have passed since it began. Yeah, it should be since it began. Because like saying that saying era so many times is just as bad as talking about path. Like I'm gonna say the word path so many times, and I'm gonna get pissed off because I wrote the damn thing. So there's that too. But I really kind of want to go and be like, do I really? I think this is where we're gonna go here. Like, I think we should talk a little bit, yeah, in this part here. Maybe not in full detail, but just kind of explain what happened then. And I think that'll give us a better sense of setting. It's hard to talk about the narrative here. Who's actually talking here? Is it the author? Is it just like it's really hard to say. And like translating this into a visual novel is going to be really hard because do you do this sort of like a cutscene where you kind of flash into witches just doing so as a witch I'm gonna I'm gonna preface everything here as saying I do consider myself a witch, not like and I'm gonna cast a spell on you or whatever, but more like I very much like witch culture and that sort of thing. So when I talk about this, we have to talk about evil witches who are going about and doing evil things. So the wrath of witches. So taking your young children and doing stuff to them. I don't know, whatever witches do with young children, turn them into potions or something. We need to have that lore established, right? And that's what was happening in the Wrath of Witches. But somehow then the Age of Retribution comes around, and all these evil witches are corralled and then, supposedly executed. So that's the idea here that we need to play with. It's like, okay, we got to that point, and now we have had decades of peace in what we call the era of peace, I guess. So I'm gonna have to I think around here I'm going to expand upon it. It might add like 2 or 3 paragraphs, but I think it's a reasonable approach. So now we're here and we're entering into a new era. Well, is that fair to say? Her father outed her as a witch. Okay, so her father is responsible for that? I feel like this is a bad idea. And immediately handed it over to the Grand Indicator. So the word Indicator is a very old. It's derived from Latin. Like the word Inquisitor is actually based off the Latin word Indicator. I cannot say this probably to save my life. I really don't like this term that I've come up with to describe somebody who would be going after them. I feel like this is me getting a little too carried away with some of the word choices here. So I think that's something we need to expand upon a little bit. So we have that. He ordered an immediate trial, which started later in the afternoon. Late into the afternoon, or later in the afternoon. That's a hard one there. On the same day she was handed over to him. What the fuck, Harry? Anyway, so there we go. So I don't like this part here. This is bugging me. This full disclosure, I was on a train when I wrote most of this, and I knocked my head a couple of times on the luggage stuff above me because it was like 7 to 8 hours on a train. I was going to make these mistakes. So this sentence here, all of this. Yeah, so like we can probably move this. I think this is in the wrong spot. Where the hell's my mouse cursor? There we go. Okay. So we have that there. She survived the first day of trial only because someone set fire to the Grand Courthouse. Let's get rid of this. She survived only because someone set fire. She escaped. I think this should really be like, don't we mean escaped? What's great is I'm talking to 2 months ago me. So there's some weirdness with the way I'm writing a lot of this. In the midst of the mayhem in the building. I don't think we need this. In the midst of the mayhem, someone grabbed her and ushered her into a secret corridor, handing her the box and letter she has now. I want to talk more about this. Oh my god, Carrie. I swear to god, I know how to spell the word spear. Sphere. Can the web captioner do the word sphere? Spear. Spear? Spear. I give up. Sphere. Whatever. It's not picking up on the PH, and honest to goodness, it might be just me not doing a good job on saying words. So this whole thing here, we need more environment. We need more atmosphere. Run in and follow these instructions. I feel like this can be lumped in with the previous paragraph, so something to consider for later. Here we go. After an hour, she immediately comes across towering trees, which perfectly form an arch with their branches over the... I'm using their branches. This seems awkward. There's a symbol of a circle and a star in each of them. It has to be these trees, right? They're the obvious ones. So, like, here's the thing. Like, whose narrative is this? Like, when I look at this here, it says, it has to be these trees, right? They have to be the obvious ones. Isn't that her saying this and not the narrator? Because, like, this is, like, where all the tough stuff is. The note said to simply wait. That's so incredibly vague. Like, if I'm given a letter, like, here's an idea. So, like, you open up, like, you get some notes here, right? So you're handed a letter. It says, like, these instructions are purposely vague. 1, go to the bathroom. 2, go to the store. 3, wait. It's like, it doesn't really tell you too much, right? If I got handed this note, I'd be like, go to the bathroom and then what? Go to the store and do what? Wait? What the fuck is this? So, like, I don't like that idea. So... oh boy. Okay. Alright. After an hour, she immediately comes across 2 towering trees, which form an arch. Yeah, blah, 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 blah. And then... oh, did I put this in the wrong... excuse me for one sec. I put this in the wrong section. That's why I was like, where did this all go? Okay. Alright, she sat down on a nearby rock. It had been hours since she was able to... like, what do you mean by nearby? Okay, so we got that. So we have established that story, that part of the story. What else do we have here? She sat down near Roy Rock. It had been hours since she was able to do anything but be on her feet. They felt raw, but were not as like. Let's talk about what she's wearing. Okay, so let's talk about what she is wearing here somehow. I think that might be important. Um, they felt raw, but not as raw as her wrists, which were for several hours clamped with metal bars. When did she get arrested? Hmm. I didn't delete. I purposely am not deleting stuff here because I need to be able to understand what my thinking was. Also, this song is going to put me to sleep real fast. Okay, there we go. Back to this. One thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make certain when I write this, I'm going to put this in. Should have used the notes. That's fine. Whatever. I just realized there's a feature in this tool. God, this is what happens when you don't do a lot of stuff in Word anymore. Carrie, why would you write it this way? Going forward, that's what I'm going to do, and then I'll edit these. How do you even, like, do annotations? Can you even do annotations in this? Is it even a thing in this? Okay, there's a comments thing here. Whatever. I don't want to get too hung up on this, and I also didn't want to turn this on. I don't know why I did that. There we go. Whatever. Yeah, I feel like all of this here I need to revisit. Like, so I've had actual handcuffs put on my hands, and like if they are made tight enough, they will leave marks. Like if you struggle to get out of those handcuffs, like you're going to like leave really good marks in there. I want to make it clear that these are not handcuffs but actual clamps. So there are clamps that exist that sort of like look like this, and then they just go wrap around, and they're like really solid metal. Um, the environment I'm trying to make here should have things like wrought iron, and wrought iron is, to put it best. Let me show you what wrought iron like. I think there's such a thing as. Yeah, okay, perfect. I think I found them. Gee, I wonder what sort of people buy them these days. Whatever. They look like this. Cast iron, wrought iron. The idea here is like these are very crude. There's not a lot of mechanical parts to them. Their sole purpose is to be easy to make and difficult to break. You got this here, which has literally a ball and chain, so you can't run away with them. Something like this here, this would be used on your wrists. So, um, that's the idea here, is like, this is not going to be a very sophisticated world, although I'm going to be careful about this because um, it's like, the idea here is that there is going to be magic in this. I've already established this with the rock and the blue glowing circle, right? But all the physical things that you run across that seem to be human made and not by magic should look very primitive. We're talking 15th, 14th century sort of level of technology. But there should be some. I feel like I do need to put some level of anachronisms in this, and there's a good reason for it. So like, if you're not certain what I mean by an anachronism, an easy example would be having electricity in the Renaissance era. Now, to be fair, if it's entirely possible to have electricity, I guess, in a Renaissance era, like, we did manage to establish things like, when did we get windmills? Okay, yeah, so the first vertical windmills appeared in Western Europe, or Northwestern Europe, in the 12th century. So that's what it says here. So we're talking like the 1100s, right? If somebody was clever enough, they probably could have had somebody figure out, oh, we can make electricity. But like, if you were to do this with the expectation of having some level of realism, throwing electricity in the era when windmills were a relatively new thing would have been extremely it would be considered an anachronism. Or having printed books prior to the printing press, because prior to the printing press, books were all handwritten. So like, you wouldn't have a world full of literacy until books were produced en masse, requiring the need to have, universal literacy. Things like that. Like, literacy rates. What were literacy rates like prior to? Yeah, okay, so it's hard to say. I found an article on the UBC website. It's saying, I wonder what the literacy rate was back then, actually. It's a very good question. That's something I could play around with, is the idea of like little things like this, like what's the literacy rate like? Like in Lane versus Wright, that was something that was rather interesting, is that people knew what was coming out in those books. So like, but this world was very much like post-medieval. So literacy rates were not very high then. Some people, like, I'm just looking at around here, and the numbers seem to be anywhere between 25 and 40% were illiterate prior to the printing press. And then after the printing press, literacy rates went up. So it's possible to kind of play around with this. Like, if we have printing presses, little things like that. So like, these are all the things that like I think about as I'm writing or like brainstorming these ideas. But I've gotten sidetracked from this. Again, world building is interesting. Is it going to become important that there is that there is universal literacy in this environment? That's a tough question because I haven't gotten to that point yet. So, all right, let's get to this next paragraph here. The wind is blowing, and aside from the insects making mating noises or whatever they do here, it is simply quiet. Again, the narration is a little inconsistent. She has not heard dogs or men since she made it across the river, and the only light she can make out are the stars and moon which hang over her. She must be alone now. And then this is where we immediately jump to her waking up, and I don't like this. It's so jarring. Okay. What I think I want to do here with this part is let's consider revisiting the trial. She falls asleep, right? Why can't we play in our minds the trial itself? Like, how hard would it be for us to have her fall asleep and imagine the trial? We don't have to imagine everything. We don't even have to talk about how she was arrested. We don't, like, I actually have the part about her getting arrested sort of played out in my head and what that scene should look like. I don't mind expanding upon it because I feel like it's going to come up anyway. But like the idea I have here is that she's a person of importance, and so is her father. And we should talk about how she's in a space that is obviously bigger than the spaces that would exist for everybody else in the place that she lives in. I haven't really come up with a name for this world or this place. You know, I feel like there are so many names that would fit very well, but I've been staring at place names for at least a couple of weeks, and I want to stick with an Anglo theming to it. Part of me has considered looking at Cornwall as a general area in England. Let me pull up a map of Cornwall. And I'll talk about the arrest here. Actually, I want to do this in the other browser. So, Cornwall is an interesting part of the United Kingdom. It is basically the very south of mainland Britain. One thing it shares in common with Wales is how it used to have its own language. So just Wales has Welsh. My name is Cariad. It's Welsh for sweetheart, dear, lover, lovely, that sort of thing. But just like Wales, Cornwall has its own language. And it was Cornish, and it's in the same family as Welsh, Gaelic, which is Scottish, and Irish as well. And there's a lot of cute little names here. Like, I could call it, maybe Mitchell's not a great name, but I could call it like Whitecross, maybe. But I feel like Whitecross is too anglicized, right? It must have been an anglicized name at some point. But then we end up with Tregurian. That sounds a little too Game of Thronesy, right? Crantock. Or Carinus? Carinus? This one's a hard one for me to figure out how you're supposed to say. But like, I look at these place names and I'm like, these have to have Cornish origins, right? So there's Gunon and Goonbell. So these must have some sort of religion. Then Gunvea, Mingoose, Toan Cross, Port Portawan, Porthowan, I guess. God, this is literally going to the tail end of. Yeah, and there's Land's End. This is literally as far as you can get by road. This is the westernmost point of England at this point. And actually, well, no, not the most westernmost point of Britain, but it's the westernmost point of England. But anyway, I toyed with like looking into this a little bit deeper, as like the origin of some of these names, and then maybe using Cornish names as a way to do place names, and perhaps even look for Cornish names, like person names. Annabelle is not a would not be considered Cornish. But nonetheless, looking at like dead British names, Britannic names, I guess, might be a way for me to kind of figure out how to name stuff, name people, and that sort of thing. I feel like if I were to go and just sort of conjure up my own names, that you'd end up with something like, I don't know how to describe it, but I just don't feel like it would have any level of authenticity. So we're toying with the name Annabelle, and Annabelle's just the working name. I feel like I'm going to change it. I'm going to look for names that don't work. But anyway, so like I said here, I want to like expand upon, you know, like her falling asleep. How does she fall asleep? She fell asleep by sitting on a rock. Well, maybe I should talk about how, this is again input from a friend. What was the rock like? What did it feel like? What, you know, what was around the rock? Was the rock warm? Was it cold? Was it super flat, right? And, you know, nothing is mentioned about this rock. So maybe I should say something along the lines of, like, it was very comfortable to lie down on, and then expand upon the, you know, how her feet felt, and like what was not really doing it for her. So we got that part there. We'll get here, and now we get to, she suddenly wakes up to daylight, and she is still alone. We've established that she wasn't supposed to meet anyone here. Okay. The sun was fully above the horizon, but just so that... I'm gonna have to figure out how I'm gonna like incorporate these in, but that's okay. That it has to be early morning. The note never made mention of what would happen at these obvious trees, and to be fair, the note doesn't even suggest why the trees would be obvious. God damn, do I hate this. Again, I'm going to be critical of this. It's towards me, and I want to fix it. So it's not going to, so don't take it as me kind of like taking a shit on my creative behavior. It's me revisiting this and going, wow, I do not like how I wrote this. I'm going to redo this part. I feel like this sentence here, with curiosity, she decided to look at the trees and notice the symbols once more. Wow, this is awkward. Yeah, I've written like rants in my code for work. It's like somebody noticed one of my rants at work ages ago, and you're like, wow, you were angry that day. And I looked at that and it was like, oh yeah, that sucked. Because, like, I think I spent like 3 hours on what ended up being 2 lines of code because I just couldn't get my head around what the problem was. Okay. There's circles of a 5-point star in the middle. Oh, we should talk about this here. Okay. They had to be fresh carvings, no more than maybe a day or two old. God, narration is so hard. These symbols were not new to her, as they were the same as the one... God. The one on the box she was carrying, albeit it had a much... Oh my god, strike that out. There we go. It had a much more ornate engraving. I'm gonna have to talk about this box, and we really should talk about this box. Okay. God, I'm wondering like how many it's pushing all that down, so it's gonna be hilarious once I go and edit this. With her fingers, she circled the carving on one of the trees. Tracing her index finger from the top of the circle, she followed it, and upon reaching quarter way, she heard a click behind her. The rock she fell asleep on opened up and revealed itself to be a chest. I don't exactly hate this. I want to kind of give us a little bit more pizzazz. Okay. What the hell is this? She screamed out loud. I think she should jump back. Okay, there we go. This is not something she had ever seen before. A rock that opens up and is hollow inside. It was solid like any other rock before. What? Okay. How could it be that it opened up? She circled the rock. Or circled the carving. Okay. She turned to look back at the circle she followed with her finger. It was glowing blue. Why did she decide to trace her finger on that circle? What compelled her? So, like, this, my complaint here is that she should have, like, when she saw it, there should have been, like, this tense moment. So as she touches it, all of a sudden, like, there's some, like, there's a build-up. That's what I'm trying to think of here. Like, there's a build-up that happens. She goes and sees the symbols once more, and she's like, just traces it. And to be fair, I've done the exact same thing. Like, I would go up to, like, when I was a kid, there was these church pews, right? you go up to it and you would go and like touch the engraving on the pews of, you know, the cross, and you would follow it with your fingers. So by doing that, that should build a little bit of tenseness, right? Like she does it, she goes up to it and she just starts to circle her finger. Just does it very slowly, and then all of a sudden she pulls away, right? So like I feel like a lot of this is really good, but I need to reorder this because I'm not satisfied with this part here. But the other problem is she jumps to a conclusion. This has to be magic. I thought magic was gone. I thought it went with the witches. Am I really a witch? This is a fun conflict that I could play with, but I feel like it might be a bit premature. So, like, she's very conflicted about what she had done. She went and touched this, and all of a sudden, the rock opens. Like, did she... Like, why did she come to the conclusion that she's a witch, right? You know, like, I guess we could say, well, you know, she was in trial. Or barely made it into trial, and then everything went to shit. So, the idea I have here is, like, why would I discuss this now? Like, is this the right point? So, I'm gonna mark this in red because I don't like where this sits. Nervously, she approached the now hollow rock and peered inside. There was a key, a flask, and another note. I don't really hate this. Like, maybe what I should do is talk about this rock. Because, like, here's the thing. Like, you get a rock that opens up. Oh, look at that. There's a bunch of crap inside, right? So, you know, there's a note. There's a key. And a flask, right? Should I talk about the flask? Should I talk about the note? What should the key look like? Right? These are all little tiny things. Like, keys from this, like, from a place, like, the keys here should be, by default, very unsophisticated. But maybe this is a point where I can introduce some level of anachronism. So, like, here's an example. Let me pull out my lockpicking kit because I can use an idea, give me an idea of what I'm talking about. And this is not going to be the best analogy, but it'll give you an idea of where my mind is. Perfect. I found what I'm looking for. All right, and then I need one other thing. Actually, this is a better example for what I'm going to talk about because then I'm not risking anything. Sure. Let's just something better in here. All right, so I have experience in locks. I know a lot about lock picking. So this is a standard key. I don't care if you see these keys because they actually belong to these. These are lockpick locks. Like they're here for the sole purpose of learning how to pick a lock, right? The idea I have with the key is, well, the keys that she's used to would look like this. So imagine a key that looks like this, except maybe 4 times the size. Like, you could probably just take any old piece of metal and lock the door. The whole purpose is to make it a deterrence and an annoyance more than anything else. Locks were not sophisticated in the 12th and 13th century. They were not unheard of, but they were not sophisticated. But a key like this absolutely is not something you would see from that point onward. Like, oh god, I wish I... Whose business card is this? There's like, I don't think you can make it out entirely here if I can or not. So like this thing right here, the big key that you can see there, that's still pretty sophisticated for that era, but it's a lot more realistic than having a modern key like I showed you earlier. So I think like this is probably a point where we can introduce an acronym. Oh my god, can I not spell an acronym? Is that not the spelling for an acronym? That has to be the spelling for an acronym. Oh wait, no, anachronism. I realized what I spelled wrong. They spell an acronym. No, that is the correct spelling of an acronym. Okay. I was like, I did spell as an acronym, and then I realized, no, I forgot to put the CH because, yeah. Anyway, a flask. Talk about the flask. Talk about the rock and its contents a bit more. So, okay, so like what's in this rock? Well, we got a key. The key looks relatively modern by their standards. We need to make it so it's obvious that it's a key. But maybe we can talk about it in the note. We can say the note has a key. We need to introduce these little anacronyms into the story because it's going to become important as we move along. But you get the idea here. Like, we need to somehow tie it all back. So anyway, this had to be the obvious place. I'm going to revisit this. There is nothing else that could be more obvious. 2 trees carved with the symbol on the box she was handed. A rock that was somehow... Wow, I hate this. Alright, and then nervously, sure, whatever. There's a comment, I can go there. Handwritten note. I should really, like, describe the, Okay. Here we go. Nervously, she grabbed... There should be... So we should talk about, like, what this paper is, right? Like, it's not going to be paper... Is it going to be paper like this? This is Ursula Le Guin's, The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas, right? So if you're wondering what's printed on here, this is nothing important. Well, it is important, but it's nothing, like, I should be concerned about. But nonetheless, the whole point is, this is not paper you should expect from a world that is, you know, pre-Renaissance, post-medieval, whatever you want to call it. It should have, you know, imperfect edges. It should feel rough. Like, this paper we have today feels very smooth, right? Like, it does feel like it has friction, but it feels smooth. Whereas paper that you would find from that era, it's going to be a lot more fibrous. You're going to look at it and you can see the individual fibers. It will not be pure white. This is bleached. The color is removed from the pulp, right? So all those little tiny things probably should be described at this point. Now, the letter here is kind of interesting. I don't know what to do about this. It says, "Hello, Annabelle." And again, I want to... Is this how we introduce her name? I don't know. I'm gonna have to think about this. Hello, Annabelle. It should be daylight as you're reading this. So the expectation is that whoever is communicating with her has sort of anticipated her behaviors or something. I am sorry for all the confusion and hope that you made it safely with the box. The key inside of this chest will allow you entry into my home, which is a short walk past these trees. Let yourself in, and I will join you by nightfall. Okay. I have left you something to drink, which should make you feel better quickly. I hate the page. The writing's awkward in this letter, but whatever. It's not signed, which I'm going to point out here. Only consume it when you've made it safely into my home, as it is the safest place to do so. And, like, I like the idea of having a flask full of a beverage that she can drink to make herself, recover. It's a little creepy the way that I wrote about this, but, like, maybe that's a side effect. It's a healing potion, but a consequence is that it makes you incredibly fucking drowsy, but it works, and then I'll reveal myself upon my return. So I feel like it's kind of awkward that we get to go straight to this person's house. So I'm gonna do something here and I'll be like, yeah, again, I don't know how I feel about this letter. The note's writing resembled the note she received earlier. Handwriting, I guess? Maybe. At least now it is less vague, even though she has no clue to who this person is Carrie. Anyway, there's again little tiny irritations here. And this is giving me, like, all of the stuff I'm doing here is helping me to come back to just expand this chapter. I don't know how I'm going to write this as we go further into this, but again, I wrote this chapter with the idea in mind that I was going to revisit it and correct my mistakes. She looked at the key in the flask and proceeded to walk down the path. As she walked through the trees, okay, because we want to make certain, like, we know what these trees are, like, kind of weird. She heard a thud again. She heard a sound. Oh my god. Maybe a sound instead. And the rock was closed. She hurried back and could not see it. Hurried back to the rock, I guess. And could not see a single gap anywhere. So, like, again, we gotta really expand upon this rock. Because, like, all of a sudden you have a perfectly normal rock right in front of you. And maybe we should talk a little bit about that. Like, I don't want us to get too fixated on it, but because this rock did something unnatural. It opened up. It was hollow inside. It had stuff in it. And now it's closed itself, and there's no indication that this rock should be capable of this. Things like that. She knocked on it and didn't sound hollow at all. So, like, again, like, I really should go further than this. I don't think this is giving enough context to, like, give you an idea of what this rock is. Because, like, you can just go outside and look at a fucking rock and be like, oh, look at that, it's a rock. No, we need to talk about why this rock is special. So, I'm going to be super critical of these things, and I'm enjoying being critical in my own direction for once. Not that I'm never not. Going back to the tree, she noticed the symbols were gone. Everything was confusing. So, like, Yeah, so like we can talk about here is like, well, the symbols have faded away from these trees. Is there anything to indicate that there were symbols there earlier? Like, like if you go and like you get a scar, right? That scar, you like say you get like surgery or you cut open your skin, right? It's gonna leave a scar. If you go and mess with a tree and you leave carvings into it, those trees are going themselves are going to have scars in those places, right? The tree is going to try and fix the bark that has been removed, right? But now that tree is seemingly fine, so I need to like talk about that because you need that visual appearance. Again, like a lot of this will be translated into something that's graphical, and that's fine, but I need to write it as a story and then take it all apart, have the dialogue there and all that sort of thing. All right. This is where I start to get a little bit pissed off at myself and I feel like I know why I did this. I was going like 240 kilometers an hour at this point on the train. And I feel like I knew I was getting to the end of my train ride. I'm not gonna just strike this out. Pretend this doesn't exist. A few minutes later, she found a wooden home. I guess we should talk about it being wooden. But a few minutes later, like, how long? Like, she walked underneath the trees, so you followed the path. We should talk about the short walk. She found a wooden home. It looked very meager but well kept. And then we go on about saying it's expensive. The word meager, in combination with expensive, is a little bit weird because meager is to kind of mean inferior, but then I'm saying that it looked expensive. I don't understand what I was writing here, but like you can't say meager and expensive together. Unless you're talking about a McMansion, I guess. You build a McMansion, it costs a lot of money to build, but it's going to look like shit. I guess you could say that's meagerly expensive. But I don't know. I'm splitting hairs here, imagine. So anyway, how the hell can it be expensive? So gotta take my pot shot somehow at McMansions. Her father's home had glass windows, but most of the townsfolk did not. So we can. I don't know how much I want to talk about this part here in contrast, but I feel like this is an opportunity to compare home exteriors. Okay. She inserted the key into what? And entered the home. Placed her and entered the home. Placed her belongings on the table in the entryway, and immediately sat in a chair far more comfortable than that rock. Let's ignore the rock. All right. Yeah, like I don't think I think we should talk about like the chair is comfortable. She's been on the lam for the past 12 hours, I guess. And now she's sitting in this super comfortable kick-ass chair. Everything was sore, so she opened up the flask and began to drink the liquid. She felt this warmth take over her body and felt drowsy. I guess I'll take a nap, she said, and immediately fell asleep for a second time since leaving home. I actually don't hate this. It describes what she does really well. It ends this whole chapter on a very good note. She was instructed to open the flask. She did. She consumed it. and then immediately felt drowsy, which again, she was told not to consume it until she was somewhere safe. The home is implied to be safe, so it's okay for her to do this, and she opts to take a nap. Because it's daytime, like, we already know that. Like, she didn't have to take... There couldn't have been more than maybe 15, 20 minutes, maybe 30, at the site where the rock opened up. So all in all, like, I've expanded this story quite a bit here. Now that I've done this, how am I going to fix this story? Well, I don't have that ready just yet. I want to think about this chase scene. You know, like, there are lots of chase scenes out there. I've seen many good chase scenes. I'm probably going to watch a movie this week just for the sole purpose of getting an idea or two of how to write a good chase scene. The problem I'm struggling with right now is the era of witches that we're talking about, like these 3 eras that we've gone into. I'm going to have to think about this carefully in terms of what happened, and also be very careful again with the narration. I am going between Annabelle and whoever the hell the narrator is. Is Annabelle the narrator? I guess maybe if I'm going to do that, I'm going to have to marry myself to that concept. But is it appropriate for me to have narration that's moving about? Now, you can do that. You can totally have point of views that just shift all the time. But I'm really worried about doing this when I haven't done a lot of this, or if much of this at all, in my past. So I'm just... This is the part where I'm a little bit anxious about, like, being consistent with point of view. So there's a lot of these little things in here. I really do like what I have so far. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a pause on all this. I'm going to save this. And I'm going to consume some media. It's a long weekend for me this weekend, so I can definitely watch a movie or two easily. And I'm going to come back to this next week, Monday. So let's call this for a night. These streams are going to be short. I'm not going to do them for 3 or 4 hours like I do when I'm playing Ace Attorney or whatever. I'm going to probably spend an hour or two just sitting in front of this word processor and writing the stuff that I need to put in. And my hope is that by the end of this month I finish this chapter, because we've already established the premise. And I will write some of this when I'm not streaming. So, like, the stuff that you see is all the stuff that I'm going to be going through. And I want you all to know that, like, I'm not going to stream every single part of me writing this story, but I am going to stream me going over this, where my mind's at, where it is. And I might even be willing to take some input in, but only when it comes down to, like, do you think this works? Do you think that this is a bad idea? If anything, if you want to say so in the chat, I don't expect anyone to answer. Do you find this premise interesting? Do you think that this has potential to go somewhere? And you're more than welcome to say that at this point. More than welcome to tell me in private what you think about what you've seen so far. But just bear in mind that I'm not looking for suggestions on what to do. You can say that I like this, but I don't like how you're thinking about this part. That's reasonable. But I don't want you to say it's like, you should do this, because I'll just ignore you. Sorry, it's my creativity, right? If you don't like something, I'm going to listen to you if you give me something to work off of, but I also just won't care if you tell me what to do, because I'm going to be like, no, that's not your position. But yeah, more than welcome to drop me a line on Discord about this. It's totally okay to do that. For those of you who actually stuck around and watched me do this is really freaking cool. So let's call it the night. Again, thank you so much for watching. This is very uncharted territory for me. I'm going to stream on Wednesday night. I'm going to try and finish what I didn't get to on episode 2 of Ace Attorney 6. And I'll do a bit of a stream on Saturday and Sunday as well. We'll see how this all goes down. Let's go right off. He's playing Final Fantasy Tactics. Don't know what to tell you, but once again, thanks for watching. This is really cool. This is really fun. Y'all have a good Monday night.